Book Buzz, HarperCollins Book Buzz. Check it out. Do-do-do, Book Buzz, HarperCollins Book Buzz. Brought to you by Library Love Fest.
Well, hello. Hello, Lainey.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Galley Club, a book club for librarians. So you've heard us talk all this month about Margaret Wilkerson Sexton's forthcoming book, On the Rooftop. We've spoken about the book. We hope that you've read it. We had her associate publisher on, as well as her editor. And that was a really interesting conversation. And today we have the author herself, Margaret Wilkerson Sexton. Margaret, you care to show your face? Hello.
Hello. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Great to be here.
Where are you?
I'm in Oakland. So this is my first book that's actually set outside of New Orleans. I decided after 15 years of living here, I could kind of approach it as a subject matter and a setting in the book. And but I only felt comfortable doing it if I did it from the perspective of a woman who equally is not from the Bay Area. So Vivian and I are both outsiders essentially, and we've moved here, and I'm here also in the Bay Area in Oakland.
Well, you look like you're exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So we are so excited to have you on. Thank you for making the time to speak with us and to librarians about your forthcoming novel, On the Rooftop, which goes on sale in September. So librarians, we know you've been reading. And don't forget that Library Reads votes are due August 1. And we're going to talk about this novel in a second. There's so much to dive into. There's so much to talk about in this novel. But first, a quick bio and intro of you, Margaret Wilkerson Sexton. You studied creative writing at Dartmouth College and law at UC Berkeley. And your most recent novel, The Revisioners, won a 2020 Janet Heidinger Kafka Prize and an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work. And it was a national bestseller, as well as a New York Times Notable Book of the Year. And your debut novel, A Kind of Freedom, was longlisted for the National Book Award. So now we have your next novel, which has already received great praise, and we'll share some of that as well, On the Rooftop, which, as I say, is going on sale on September 6th. And this is a beautiful, compelling novel about a mother who's got a dream of musical stardom for her 3 daughters. And as these daughters grow up, their ambitions start to go in different directions. And it is all set against the backdrop of gentrifying 1950s San Francisco. Hence, Lainey's backdrop. Lainey.
Oh, hold on. You can't see me. Okay. Yay.
Love that.
I know. I just want to like jump into this photo.
I do too. And you know, it's a common backdrop in like local Zoom calls. So I actually didn't think about it. Like,
well,
it's really not from, yeah.
No, I
so
can't
nice.
say I've had this backdrop before, but I have it today.
Perfect.
Uh-huh.
So, Margaret, talk to us. Tell us about the book. Tell people what you want them to know about the book. For the handful of people who haven't read it,
Yeah.
tell us a bit.
Yeah, so it's from the perspective of a widowed mother who has moved from Louisiana to escape the Jim Crow South, and her name is Vivian, and she has 3 daughters, and she's in San Francisco now, and she's pinning all her hopes on her daughter's musical success. They're part of this singing group called the Salvations, and she desperately wants them to succeed in this world. And as we get to know her and as we get to know the family, we come to realize that it's not really about the music for her. It's more about feeling some sort of stability and creating some sort of stability for her life in the wake of losing her father to racism, to Klansmen in the South. And in the wake of becoming a widow, almost as soon as she moved to San Francisco, she's trying to create this safety net for herself. And one by one, her daughters refuse to comply. And she has to come to find that security within.
Yeah, that it's, I love this jacket so much.
Isn't it lovely? I always, you know how some compliments you're like, oh, that's so kind. But this one, I don't have anything to do with the cover. So I love to hype this up. I think it's just such a beautiful cover. And it captures so much in this one image, you know? It captures so much of what we're trying to do with this story.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost feel like that. The microphone, I mean, I don't know if this is what you think, but there's, in a way, it feels spiritual.
You know, I never thought about it like that. Oh my gosh. Can you say, what do you mean by that? Because I sort of get it on this like visceral level when you said that, but I'm like not sure why.
You know what, when we were speaking with Miriam Parker, Echo's associate publisher, the imprint that's publishing this book, and Sarah Birmingham, your editor, and we talked about the jacket, and I almost brought it up then, but I didn't, because I thought, what if that wasn't their intention?
Right, and I don't know
maybe it wasn't, but to me, it almost feels almost like because there is I think there are so many things flowing through this book, and we'll get to all of that, but there's a sense of spiritualism, and there is a sense of I don't know, movement. And when I look at that microphone, I almost feel it's almost church-like. I feel like it's I can't really quite explain it, but I think because it's radiating the way it is. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it like I was thinking it's like an orb or something.
Exactly.
And all the light is coming off of it. Yeah, that's right. And it's true that so much of the foundation for their singing work has taken place in the church, which is such a common thing historically for singers, for especially from the Black community, to just have started out with that foundation.
Yeah.
Well, I think of like the preacher too. You know, they're in church all the time. The mom has this, you know, relationship with the preacher, and so it really does go hand in hand. Virginia, I've never really thought about it, but yeah, I see it too.
Yeah, we'll have to find out from the artist, who's actually works at Echo, and we were talking about this. She's just so talented, and so to take the beautiful book that this is on the pages and then wrap it in something so beautiful is really a cool thing. But anyway, so I'm glad that you love the jacket. I mean, you know, there's a lot going on in this book, and so to get that in. And some of it, you know, you don't have to tell, obviously, the whole story on the jacket, but do you want to talk about why you set the book, when and where you set it?
Yeah, well, as you know, the book is inspired by Fiddler on the Roof, and I grew up obsessed with that play. My mother had it playing in the background of my childhood, I feel like, you know, for at least a decade. And it was actually my mother's idea to base a book on Fiddler on the Roof, but her idea was completely different. In fact, she started the galley, and she was like, okay, stop telling people you got this idea from me, because this is not my idea at all. And just stop, because I wouldn't have done that. But her idea was to have Katrina be the parallel displacing force. So, and then she had this fabulous image that had come to her for like the climax of the book. She wanted people to be on the roof holding signs saying, help me, you know, the images we were flooded with during Katrina. And I mean, I thought that was so powerful. But I wasn't able to tell another Katrina story. A Kind of Freedom, my first book, was, you know, touched on it quite a bit. And I just wasn't in a space to want to tell that story. So I had to think about another way to find a displacing event that felt like it would be, you know, equally moving for a reader. And I really didn't know about this. I didn't know about the urban renewal program that came around in the 50s and 60s and displaced thousands of Black people from the Fillmore. I knew about gentrification on a large scale in San Francisco, and in particular the Fillmore, but I didn't know when it started, and I didn't know the nature of how it started. And it was just through doing research that I found it. And once I found it, and once I found that it wasn't just the, this pocket of Blacks in the Fillmore. It was like almost like a phenomenon, because they had come over for the war and they were coming over to escape these really oppressive conditions, and they were filled with so much optimism and hope, and they created this community for themselves that in so many ways echoed what they had come from. Like a lot of this book was almost it almost felt like, in a way, it was set in Louisiana, which I'm used to, because they brought Louisiana with them to San Francisco. And so when I found out that there was all that culture there, and when I found out that it was truly called the Harlem of the West because of the jazz element, and because of the music industry that burgeoned at that time in that place, I just thought, oh my gosh, there's so much here. Like, there's so much here to be mined. I felt like it would add so much texture and richness to this book to have all of these levels presented there. And again, I didn't even know about them. I truly didn't know about them until I started doing the research.
Yeah, it's really sort of, unsettling in a way when the main characters in the book, the people in the community, which Vivian says basically saved her life, such beautiful writing, and how they talk about, like, have you heard? And they're like, yeah, but, we've heard it before. No, they're changing things. And it's the way that you infused it, you know what I mean? It would just sort of dripped in, you threaded it through. And then it became just so aware to the characters what was going on.
I really appreciate that, because for this book in particular, my other two books, I always have some kind of social commentary going on, and usually it's primary. Usually it's in your face. Nobody would have said it was dripped in. For this one, I really intentionally wanted to have whatever painful historical moment I was pointing to, I wanted to have it be the backdrop. I really did. I wanted the focus of the book and the main feeling tone of the book to be joyful and celebratory, despite what was happening in the background and despite what we know happened. And it doesn't undermine what happened, in my opinion. It's still calling attention to it, and it's still calling attention to the present day echoes of it. But I just wanted, I was writing this during the pandemic. George Floyd had just been murdered. I just wanted I wanted readers to be feeling like a different tone than what we were already plagued with at that time. I felt like we had enough on our plates emotionally. And so I really appreciate you saying that, it was threaded in, it was dripping, it was dripped in, because that's what I wanted. I wanted it to, yes, be there, but not to take over the story.
Yeah, and it doesn't, because the reader cares so much about the journey of these women, the mother and the daughters, and what happens to them. But it plays on different levels. So, and I appreciated it the way it played out. It felt very natural, because nothing ever comes that hard that fast. I felt like it felt natural.
That's a really good point, because that's how it is in life,
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Seems
okay.
more realistic,
Right. That's a really good point.
Especially with gentrification, where you're like, I might not look at every building that's changing and be like, oh, every day, but in 10 years, you look back and think, this is totally different.
Right.
And there's not a place for me in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And often you see it when people visit, and it's almost like when someone is sick and you're living with them, or someone is, and you don't really see it, but when you're not there and you come every few months, you can really feel those stark effects because you're not bombarded with it every day. But yeah, and I feel like when people visit a city that's been gentrified, and they haven't been there for all of it, but they come back in 10 years, they're like, oh, wow,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And people get pushed out.
Yeah.
I read this one sentence from the book because I don't know, it just hit me. And it's in the beginning, but I'd like to read it again. When you write, Vivian had begged Ellis to move her from Louisiana after a Klansman smashed her bedroom windows with shotguns and dragged her daddy to his death. Ellis had been her boyfriend then, but as soon as they crossed the state line, he'd married her, given her 3 children, then died, and she'd grieved. But her neighbors carried over stews and roast and potatoes and string beans. If it hadn't been for them, she wouldn't have made it.
I know. I know.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You say it was the people she'd passed, who she just passed when she was walking home, who'd rebirthed her once her husband died. That was so beautiful. But it also, sort of tells you how, and how close they really are. She's walking down the street and she's talking to the butcher, and she's been there for 25 years, and she knows her people.
Yeah. Yeah, and they have become family replacement.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's funny. I don't think I consciously did this, but as you were talking about it just now, I remember that's how my aunt grew up. I'm sorry. That's certainly how my aunt grew up with her mother. But what I was exposed to was how my first cousins grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and they lived on the same block for like 25 years. And they're still, half the block is still there, but they've moved on. But like, that's how it was. I remember I would go for the summers, and we would go to a neighbor's house and just open the door. You didn't even knock, which now is unthinkable. I'm like, you have to call before you're coming. And I'm going to need 2 days notice, but, but that's how I grew up. And it was just, there's something that was just so cool. And I miss that. And I just miss that so much. So it was nice to experience it again here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess too, the time, I mean, it's the 50s, it's different, now it is so, that would be unusual now.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah. So Lainey, I don't want to run over you. Are you good?
Good. Yeah. Go ahead. Run away. I know we're both just excited to talk about the book. We're like,
I know I'm hogging this. I'm hogging your time.
No, go for it.
Well, I do want to talk about, so could you sort of give a couple of, sort of a broad scope about the daughters and the mother, just give them a little bit more for people to chew on. And then I'd love us to get into the music.
Yeah.
Fabulous Spotify playlist that you made, which is so amazing.
Thank you. And thank you for suggesting it. Well, so Vivian is a very domineering woman, and she's had to be. I think she wasn't necessarily always this way. I think it's circumstantial, to be honest. What she went through in the South, and then losing her husband, she had to become the person in charge of this family. And they're all afraid of her. Her daughters are all afraid of her for different reasons. And it's interesting because you'll see in the book that they think that there are established favorites, and I love that it's from different perspectives, because we can learn that Vivian actually doesn't see it the way the daughters see it. Like, each daughter has a different perspective on the family, and that's just how it is in real life too. And even Vivian has a different perspective on how she views her daughters than what is understood among the daughters themselves. Esther, well, I'll start with Ruth. Ruth is the one who's like, she's the one who normally does comply. She knows without her mother having to tell her that she's going to need to take the chicken out of the refrigerator, that she's going to need to have her shoes ready for work. And her mother has just come to rely on her as a second mother of sorts to help with the girls. And so I think, having Ruth have to make the decision first to, without giving away anything, to not necessarily move forward with the mother's dream. I think in some ways that's the hardest one to make, because one, there's no precedent, and because two, Ruth is assumed to be the person who above everyone else is going to do what Vivian says to do. And then I think Esther's more accustomed to defying her mother's objectives. It's still difficult, but I think Esther, has sort of taken on the role of the rebel of the family, and it's still very difficult, but she's going to pretend that it's not, and she's going to pretend that she's tough, and she's going to pretend that she's just going to do it either way. And then Chloe is, this is something that developed at the end of my writing process, actually. Chloe is sort of it feels like she's the forgotten sister. And, no one really, in the beginning, no one really takes her seriously. She's the baby of the family, so she's loved and she gets all the love. But in terms of like being a powerful force in this group, she's not quite taken as seriously. So it's interesting to see her develop as well, because that's something that I didn't even see coming when I was writing it. I really didn't see her arc moving as much as it moved until the end of the process.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. What about Vivian? Is Vivian a stage mother? Is Vivian are these sort of like I don't know if unrequited is the right word, but are these like dreams that weren't fulfilled for Vivian, or is she, because in the book you say, well, the narrator says, this isn't that's not it. It's that she just can identify in each one of her daughters, especially Ruth, this like the calling, so it's really for them. But is it that, or is she Mama Rose?
Yeah. That's funny. I had another interview where someone said she was Mama Rose. Yeah, I mean, I love that. What I love about her is that she's like, one bad day a week away from being completely unhinged, in my opinion. I think I love that she's just walking this tightrope, and she's mostly on the right side. She's mostly upright and she's mostly okay. But I love when she kind of dips a little bit precariously into truly being unhinged each time they defy her. But I like that we can look at it from our current perspective and recognize the model, right? The stage mom model, and that it resonates even with with the younger generation. Like, okay, we all know what that looks like. I think all the stage moms have something that they're running away from. That's my opinion. That they're trying to protect themselves or their children from, and hers, because of her particular situation, happens to be not only a personal thing that she's running away from, but also like a systematic thing. Like, she's running away from the Jim Crow South. She's running away from being a Black woman in the 50s. And then ultimately she's running away from the change that's happening in her community, as we speak, in the current timeline of the book. And I think that's why it gets even harder to see. Like, I almost think if those girls defied her and everything around her was stable, it would have been easier for her to handle it. But because she's also facing this change, that's basically what she's been trying to have this one thing that she can control, because everything around her was unsteady. And so I think if this had happened and in the present day, there was some stability she could rely on, I think it would have been a little bit easier for Vivian. But ultimately, I don't think it has. Yes, she did want to be a performer, and that's sprinkled in, even though she's in denial about that. Yes, she did, but I really think it's deeper than that. I think it's that she's just trying to create a safe space for herself and for her family, and she doesn't know how else to do it. And there's this one line where she's like, I can't remember exactly, but she's like, there were so few ways she could create that safety net as a Black woman at that time, and this is one that she happened upon, and it was going in the right direction and it was working for her. And then now all of a sudden these ungrateful children are trying to take it away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But also, I didn't really think about it till just now, but she's, like you're saying, she wants control, but in some ways all of the daughters want the same thing, and then they get their own control, and then they're like, well, I don't know if that's what I want or not.
Right. I love that. I hadn't thought about it like that, because they're also Black women in the 50s.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. And, I have to say, my mom is my brother is a professional tennis player, and my mom is his manager. So, without getting too personal, I've had great models for these kinds of characters. Like, and it's that's where I'm getting this whole, like, it's not always about what they say it's about, even though they always have the most positive, motives, and they're trying to protect their children. They're trying to create a safety net for their children. There's always some other stuff going on as well.
You can only be as truthful as self-aware you are, So, well, I want to talk a little bit about music. So you have this great playlist, which we're going to play a little bit if you want to talk about that. But we were talking to Sarah Birmingham last week, and she was just saying how cool it is that you wrote a lot of the music in there, and it kind of is woven through, and you wouldn't exactly know what is and isn't. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to do that. Did she explain that for legal reasons they needed me to? They were like, Yeah, I mean, because I initially was going to just reference actual songs for various reasons. You know, one, namely, I'm not a songwriter, but she was like, we're definitely going to have to take away most of these references. That's absolutely going to happen. You could either just take them away and have that be the end of it, or you could also write some lyrics yourself. And I hadn't even thought about that. But the funny thing is, when I was a kid, I used to write songs, you know, truly just in my house, like for fun. And I was like, oh, actually, this will be really fun. And so I just started doing it just truly for fun. And that was also it was just a pleasurable aspect of writing the book. You know, so much of writing a book is not fun. You know, the revision process for me is not necessarily fun. But this was something where I was like, you know, if I had on my calendar that day that was the aspect of the book I was going to focus on, I would be excited about it. Yeah. And, you know, I don't think I also felt like I was able to match the skill level of the character. You know, Esther is basically one of the ones who's doing the songwriting. And I felt, you know, she's just starting out as a songwriter, and I'm not a songwriter. So I felt like, you know, I wouldn't have necessarily done it for a character who was supposed to be, you know, the best songwriter in the country. But but it felt like a good match with where Esther was in the book.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Have you ever found any of your songs from when you were little? And I know things you write down, you find.
I have some of them in my head though. And one of them that's actually in the book. That this is interesting, but in 2005, I remember this. I came up with this idea for a play in 2005, and that was going to be a musical. But again, that was it. I had the idea. Like, I'm not a songwriter and I don't write musicals, but I did have this song that just came to me at that time in 2005, and I just happened to use it for this book.
How special.
Isn't that interesting? I know.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have, so let's just play a little bit of the one song that keeps popping up in the, this is just such a great, it's a great playlist to play while you're reading this book, I think. It just really sets the tone.
Tasket, a brown and yellow basket. I send a letter to my mommy. On the way I dropped it. I dropped it. Yes, on the way I dropped it. A little girlie picked it up and put it in her pocket.
I don't want to go to Facebook jail, but you get the idea. Lainey, can you show the whole Spotify playlist just one more time so folks can see what they are in store for if they check this out? And I think Lainey put this into the chat room. So, I mean, you've got Eartha Kitt and Louis Armstrong and Mahalia Jackson. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a great vibe, Margaret. Thank you for putting that together.
Oh my gosh, thank you for suggesting it. It hadn't occurred to me, but once I did it, it was such a natural and obvious extension of the book. And it was just so cool to do.
Yeah.
I could have done it all day. I had to stop myself because
There's no place to stop doing that, I bet.
Yeah.
So we have questions on Facebook, which we'll get to. So sit tight, Facebookians. But Margaret, can you read a little section from the book that you had picked out? And could you set up what this spot is in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that in the beginning of the story, Vivian does get this offer for the girls. It's funny, I'm going to say Vivian gets an offer, and that happens throughout the book because Vivian really does think this is her offer, but it's for the girls. And this manager who's very known in the community wants to represent them. And she's just decided, after kind of going back and forth for various reasons, she's just decided to make this deal. So I'll start there. She took another sip and studied the room once more. The alcohol had cleared her in a sense, and she could see now that even here at Champagne Supper Club, one of the big three in the city, the stage was dusty. The chorus girls' wigs were slanted, their recent baby pooches hanging over their panties. The Johns were losing their patience with the night ladies who took their time. Last week, Vivian had written Final Act at Champagne down on a sheet of paper and taped it to the icebox as their next big dream. But now, in the last hour, she had begun to want more for her daughters, a hell of a lot more. And if sending them off was the path there, she would have to let them go. Maybe it was the only opportunity they'd get. She looked up. Yes. What's that? Mr. Franklin asked. Yes, she repeated, feeling like she was coming to. Is that so? She nodded. You got it. It's a deal. She stuck out her hand, and she was glad she had taken the time to polish her nails that evening, cherry red, just like her lips, and he squeezed it tight. He was the type of man who seemed to always get his way, but he seemed surprised now, pleased but surprised. You serious, aren't you? He asked, standing. No doubt the other people in the club thought they were forming more than a business alignment. Standing too, she could feel how much she'd had to drink. She had to hold on to the edge of the table before she joined him in an embrace. When she pulled back, he signaled again to the waitress, this time for a round for everybody in the place. I'm managing her daughters, he yelled out to all of them, and the chorus girls were still shaking their behinds. They'd taken off their gowns, kicked them flat on the front of the stage, and they leaned toward the audience and shimmied their chests, their overflowing coconut bras jiggling. He's managing my daughters, Vivian called out to whoever hadn't heard, and the chorus girls cheered on their way off stage, arm in arm now, snapping their legs up to the ceiling in unison. In the audience, a group formed around Vivian. The news had brought everyone to life, the bored wives, the impatient Johns, the ladies of the night who had shielded themselves all right, shielded themselves 5 drinks deep. By now, these ladies would have celebrated a murder, but luckily it was goodness tonight that called their names. Even the whites stood out and clinked their glasses. The band joined on stage and played a tisket, a tasket, and Mr. Franklin took her hand, and they came together and circled while she kicked her legs in short, quick jerks, and then he extended his arm to swing her out and watched her switch her hips on her own, and then he brought her in again, only to lift her and spin her on his back while the crowd cheered. A lady usher at the church who cooked for Lena's barbecue restaurant accepted the hand of Deacon Washington, and they came together so tight there was no room for Jesus, but everyone was too mirthful to care, and the likelihood was it wouldn't get carried back to Shiloh the next day. And then a John took a lady of the night, and then a man took his own wife, and then a different man took a different man's wife, and the whites didn't know the moves, but they switched their hips to a distinct rhythm of their own, and the chorus girls who had been on stage earlier jumped back on and sang. And then the trumpeters switched the tempo, and they weren't playing anything any of them knew. Now it was the saxophonist meeting eyes with the pianist and the drummer nodding back at the clarinet, and it was Vivian too, and not just her, but all of them, the collective soul of the place. The news Vivian had shared, the John's hopes, the wives' fears, all melding into one frequency. It was driving the sound, which was also in their bones, and without realizing it, they were all kicking their feet out at the same rhythm, snapping their bodies into their partners and back out again onto the floor, swerving and hopping and floating, really. And the joy of having formed something streamed through Vivian, lit her up, made her feel like she was shining. And she had had that feeling before, when she was married, quick and simple as it was. And when she'd borne each of the girls, of course, she had slipped above the ordinary world for a moment. And then the most recent time she was at Jack's in the front row, watching her baby sweep a room up into their command. And she'd gone silent for some time, staring in awe. And here it was again now. She could sell this moment, she knew. People would pay everything for it. She would herself if she could learn to carry it beyond these walls. But for now, it was free, even to the whites who ventured down to the Fillmore for the barbecue and the blues, and who today, for the first time, had lingered.
I just don't even have anything to say. That's transformative.
Yeah. Thank you.
Especially right next to that next scene where she tells the girls.
Right.
Like,
I know.
Yeah.
There's the highs and I mean, but it's so heady. It's so, what is happening here right now? And when everybody's just, it's like a party when it goes at that moment that it's at full tilt.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It was very celebratory, and like even hearing you read it now and talking about, what's in it for her, or you know, what's the motivation? And it's bringing her back to when she gave birth. I mean, that's what she's, you know, she's back to that moment, this thing that she's created, and it's unbelievable.
Right.
And celebratory. And then and then folks, if you haven't read it, run, don't walk. I'm not going to ruin anything, but you should know now. But read the book. No, but many have, and we have people who have written in some questions. So we have friends from all over, from Omaha and from Connecticut. People love your chair.
Oh, thank you.
Indiana.
And your earrings. They love your earrings.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You guys are so kind.
Well, they are librarians. They are the smartest people in the world, and also the kindest.
Yeah. My aunt is a librarian.
Your aunt is a librarian. Okay.
Yeah.
Where is she a librarian?
She's retired, but she was a librarian at Yale in New Haven. Yeah. And so kind. I mean, it's so true. So yeah.
So giving, you know, that's what it is. They're just,
that's right,
generous of spirit and information, but of love and just loyalty to authors and and helpful to patrons to try and get that right book into the right hand, you know.
That's right.
Oh man. So Kimberly McGee, and Lainey, you and I can go back and forth on these. Can you see these, Lainey, on Facebook? Well, if not, I have. So Kimberly McGee says, I loved how you wrote a story that all of us can identify with. Moms will always want the best for their children. And as children, we always think we know best. Beautiful family drama at an interesting point in history. So true. And she got a sense of the spiritual as well. Plus the church was such an important part of the community. Thanks, Kim. And Jennifer Winberry says, how do you think the narrative would have changed if you said it in a different time period?
That's such a good question. You know, I think it would have, I mean, I think it depends on the time period, of course. I can't imagine setting it and having the community be as much of a fixture in many decades past that point. I think, you know, we have been heading towards the current kind of, you know, more isolated experience we're having now. I think we've been heading that way for some time. I don't think it just came out of nowhere. Like the idea, I don't remember if we were talking about this before we went live, but the idea of someone just walking into your house without knocking and without calling is just unthinkable. So I think we would have lost a lot of that. And I think that's what makes much of the richness and texture of this book is the interdependence of these lives in this community. And I'm thinking about if I had said it earlier, it's such a good question. If I had said it earlier, I think we might have lost some of the optimism because they're coming in, you know, a lot of it is perspective. You know, they're thinking there's so much opportunity here because they're coming from a place where there were so few opportunities and where they were, you know, pummeled with oppression in the Jim Crow South. And they're coming in and they're like, well, you know, a lot of people were really thinking, you know, there's no racism here. This is a different part of the country and we're not going to have that experience. That experience is left behind. A lot of people did have that kind of hope, you know, which I think was dashed pretty quickly in that sense, but that was there and the conditions were better and there was employment initially and they could carry so much of the culture, the Southern culture into where they were and create this new family that I think you know, that again, that sense of community was able to be there, even though in that situation, you would think that you would expect loneliness and isolation because, you know, you're so new to a place. So I feel like if I had started it later, I would have lost the community. If I'd started it earlier, I would have lost the hope. I truly think this was the ordained time and place for this story. And I was saying before we went live, I didn't even know about any of this. I didn't know about the urban renewal program of the 50s and 60s that dislocated thousands of Blacks from the Fillmore in San Francisco, nor did I know that the Fillmore of the that the Fillmore district in San Francisco was referred to as Harlem of the West, and that there was this burgeoning jazz scene. I just didn't even know about it. So I almost feel like I was led to it. And I thought it was, and I think it's just an apt parallel to the play that very loosely inspired it, Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
There's a great behind the books piece, behind the book piece that you wrote that's about starts out with talking about your mother and Fiddler on the Roof and how you were allowed to watch some things and not others, but
yeah,
you start teaching your kids or singing Fiddler on the Roof. But anyway, it's a wonderful piece, and I think it's on Edelweiss now, so you can all check that out. It's a lovely piece about Margaret's formative years and then her older years as a mom.
Thank you. That was really fun to write because I had forgotten about all of that stuff. That, you know, for people who haven't read it, my mother, she would let you watch any kind of movie. It didn't matter. The rating didn't matter as much as whether or not there was going to be a sex scene. So you could watch Lethal Weapon, RoboCop, but if there was going to be anybody kissing in that movie, it was going to be a problem. And that's why we were Fiddler on the Roof. You know, there were no sex scenes, so that was fair game. And there were a few other random movies, but they were all just very random. And it was all based on that one condition.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Isn't it funny?
It is. It's sweet.
There is one comment. It's in response to about how everybody can kind of take different things from a read. It said, I loved also how by telling the story from multiple perspectives, you show us how easily family members can misinterpret each other's words and actions.
Thank you. I love that too. And, you know, again, my editor, who's amazing at Echo, Sarah Birmingham, that was also her idea. Initially, the book was structured so that Vivian got the bulk of it. And we did see, you know, maybe we saw like 10% of the daughters, but they had one block section and that was it. We didn't return to them. So the suggestion, it was a very simple suggestion to give more life and more airtime to each of the daughters. But just in doing that, it forced me to go deeper into their worlds, and it forced me to open up the door for how they were misconstruing each other's actions and words. That's exactly right. And we wouldn't have seen it if we didn't have as much of an interplay between those sections.
Right. Yeah.
I love that too. I think that's one of my favorite parts of the book is that, you know, especially because I was an only child and my brother was born when I was 16. So I grew up as an only child and I was always fascinated by families, you know, standard families, stereotypical families. And so I love that, you know, everyone, you know, you all grew up in the same house, but everyone has a different experience of it. I just think that's fascinating. And just seeing in real time how they're misinterpreting and miscommunicating. I think that's really interesting. It just adds a level of texture that wouldn't have been there without Sarah's suggestion.
Yeah. I think of that scene where Esther is just found out about Ruth. And so she's like, I could tell her, you know, I think that this is going to be fine for you. But in my head, all I'm thinking is like, everything's ruined.
Right.
And so it's like what comes out of your mouth versus what you're actually thinking. Even for them, they don't even know what. Yeah.
I know. I know. That's right. I saw it a lot with their relationship because it's so fraught. Yeah. They needed an interpreter. I felt like I was their interpreter and, you know, and like their mediator. But yeah, I know it's interesting. It's interesting how the structure alone can create can create space for that technique in a book.
Yeah.
So you get to know so much about the characters and you wonder, I mean, after Vivian seals the deal in the nightclub, it's like, oh boy, it's going to happen now. You know, and you really wouldn't get that if you hadn't, like, you know, each chapter or every couple of chapters, you've got somebody else's perspective. And so really, I mean, I'm one of four. There's a birth order and they, you know,
yeah.
The stereotypes of birth orders are there for a reason.
Right.
You know, and you can just tell the older one is the serious one who's trying to do the, you know, be the goody two shoe, follow rules and be the, you know, Anyway, it's
That's hilarious. That I know. And I'm fascinated by that because I didn't experience it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really cool that you took that suggestion from this editor who you'd not worked with before and went back and really, just overhauled the way you told the story, which is like a whole new book.
She's literally brilliant. And I'm not just saying that to be kind. And I knew I was just like basically, in talks with them. They hadn't even bought the book yet. And they told me what they would want to change. And that was the main thing, was the structure and giving more airtime to the girls. And I just thought, oh my God, no matter what happens with them buying the book, that's exactly right. And I'm going to do that either way. Like it was just brilliant. And so I just think Sarah has a very editorial mind. Like I just love that I have access to her because, it's just necessary. You need that as a writer. You have so many blind spots. And, I keep thinking I'm going to lose these blind spots as I mature as a writer, but no, I feel like the blind spots are probably going to stick around. Like you just can't see it clearly because you wrote it. And, it's just so nice to have someone who can not only identify what's not working, but also give these, really profound suggestions about what to change and why.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people can say something's not working, but they don't know how to fix it.
Right. So they gave you the toolbox, but you took them out of the box.
Yes. Thank you.
No?
Thank you.
So there is a question. Did you have a clear vision? Well, maybe we asked this. Did you have a clear vision of how the story would play out when you started? No, we didn't ask that.
Yeah, no. I thought I did. But the story today is completely different in terms of, I don't want to give anything away, but how the sisters' talent ends up being distributed. Let's put it that way, how their talents end up being distributed. I always knew Vivian was going to have to find her own security, but how those sisters' talents ends up being distributed. No, I did not know how that was going to happen. That was something that was like the tail end of that 6-month revision that I did after joining Echo. That's when I learned, like, oh, okay. This is going to look totally different than I would have imagined when I started writing. And it just was another thing. It just added another level to the book. And again, I don't think I would have come to that if I hadn't changed that structure, because I was forced to spend so much time with each of the girls. I was able to see like what their trajectories should naturally be, if that makes sense. I just knew them better. Yeah.
Let's see. A couple more. Lainey, you can't see them, right? Or can you?
I think so. Let's see.
Oh, well, here's a question.
Second book?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right, here's this one. Are you thinking of continuing the story in another book? There seems to be so much there, and I would love to see where the family goes.
Oh, that's so sweet. No, I don't think so. I mean, that could change, who knows, that could change. But once I move on from writing them and they're done, once my part is over, I just move on. I move into my next project. And this was really exciting. Like, this is the first time one of the first times I'm actually talking about the book at this level. But and it's really exciting to dig back in and remember and talk about it. And I think that's the engagement level I'm going to have with this book. I don't think I'm going to go back to the material and try to, although, let me put it this way. Oh, how about this? I think in a different medium, I will explore the future of this book. So that's what I foresee. Like, I foresee, because I would love to see what ends up happening with all of the girls. I was going to say Esther, but really with all of the girls. And I think there's room to do that in a different medium. I don't think I'm going to write another book doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say goodbye to them.
It is. I always get a little down after I have to. I'm like, I'm so eager to finish these manuscripts because everything's going to, I'm going to calm down after I finish these manuscripts. And then when it's done, I'm like, oh, I actually miss these people. But But that's kind of why I always like to have two on deck, two other projects on deck. So I don't have to worry about, I learned that with my first book. I do go into these lulls if I don't have something on deck.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And just a couple of questions from Jennifer Winberry. She wants to know if there was a soundtrack you listened to or anything that was running through your head while you were writing the book.
Yeah, that's such a great question. For some reason, Mahalia Jackson, very heavily, like extremely heavily. And the other songs too, because I had to, I know these songs anyway. I kind of grew up listening to these songs, but digging into exactly when the songs would have been popular, I did have to listen to them on a deeper level and more frequently. But like personally, when I would get into my car, when I was writing this book, I remember I would always be listening to Mahalia Jackson. And I honestly don't know why, but she came up in the book, of course, but it was almost like it was some other draw there. I really don't know. There's something about this book where she feels very representative or emblematic for me of this book.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. So are Esther and Ruth's names consciously biblical or yeah?
Yeah, they are. And even Chloe. They are. I mean, that was kind of a nod, not Chloe, but one of the songs in Fiddler on the Roof. I think it's just Sunrise Sunset, where Ruth and Esther are mentioned. And that was sort of a nod to that. And I just love the name Chloe. I regret that I don't have any children named Chloe. So my children have other names. So my husband doesn't like it as much as I like it. So anyway, now we have Chloe.
Yeah.
You got her in there somehow. This and also again, shout out to the earrings. People are loving your earrings.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Yeah, I feel like one of my students made me these earrings, to be honest. Yep. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's been a long time, but that's what I'm thinking.
Love them.
Thank you.
Margaret, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and to librarians today about this book, which is so unique. It's an important story. It's an entertaining story. It's about mothers and daughters and relationships and shifting landscapes in every sense of that phrase. It's on the rooftop. It goes on sale September 6th. Library Reads votes are due August 1. Many of you have already read it. I can't say enough about it. Lainey, I mean, do you have any closing remarks or thoughts yourself on this beautiful page-turning novel?
I don't think I could say it any better than you did, but I do just want to reiterate like what an escape it is and what a lovely read on so many levels. But I think like if you really enjoy mother-daughter relationships or even just like the music, like it really is, like I said, transformative. You get to slip away to a 50s club in San Francisco, which is, yeah, how else would you want to spend your day?
Thank you so much. I mean, truly, I mean this from the bottom of my heart because, that you guys are like the first people I'm talking to basically about the book. And it's just so heartwarming to know that it resonated with you on the levels that I intended for it to resonate and in other ways as well. It truly just means so much to me that you're calling it an escape and that you feel like you slipped away and that you really got engrossed with the family. Like I'm just so grateful to hear your kind words, and thank you just for being so warm and generous with them. Thank you.
It's our honor, truly it is. And we wish you every all the best to you for this book, and continued success and continued raves, of which there are many, and we've put them in the chat room. But you don't believe us? Read the quotes. They love this book, and there's a good reason why. Damn good. So, Margaret, thank you again, and thank you everyone for tuning in, watching, and asking questions. And look for On the Rooftop, and you will shout it from the rooftops when you read this book because it's just glorious. On the Rooftop by Margaret Wilkerson Sexton, on sale September 6th. Take care, everyone. Bye, Margaret. Thanks again.
Hi, thank you. And I love that you got an On the Rooftop pun in there. I've been doing these
Hey-o.
last few months. That was a good one. Yeah. So nice to meet you.
Nice to
And
meet
I'm sure I'll talk with you again.
I hope so.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, for
Take
sure.
care and thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.